Hi everybody, my name is Jo and I love to read. Today I'm going to be doing my January, February and half of March wrap up because I was so not motivated at the end of March to do this, and then some of the books that I'm going to talk about I started in like definitely well into March. So I'm, breaking rules, but it's all good, it's my channel. I first have two DNFs to talk about. Nevermoor I was really keen to read for so many years. It was billed as the new Harry Potter and I just couldn't get into it. I don't know whether it's my age, but I didn't even get up to the part where we went to school. It was just not gripping me. And I just thought, hey, life's too short, especially right now. I may pick it up again if Miles or any other kids are interested in reading it with me. But right now it just was not gripping me enough to want to keep reading it by myself. And Lowbridge that I DNF'd, this was really sad and this hurt me a lot. This is an Aussie author that I picked up from our local indie bookshelf. And it's also a crimey, thrillery one. It just wasn't gripping me. I did make it a lot further through this one than I did with Nevermoor, but in the end, again, it was just not interesting me. It was two different perspectives. One was a girl in the past who ends up being like the crime or surrounding the crime that has happened in the past. Her points of views were quite mundane for me. I feel like the author was trying to show the teenage experience, but I felt like too much was focused on that and not enough on interesting plot things. I just wasn't vibing with that whole teenage girl experience. So I feel like that's very specific to me and that someone else might have enjoyed it. And then the other perspective was the present day one, and she was interesting me a fair bit up to a point. She's recovering from the death of her daughter, and that was very interesting, watching her sort of go through the process, starting to turn to alcohol a bit too much to cope, and then being able to sort of pull herself out of it a bit and give herself little daily to-do lists that are trying to get her out in the community and just doing more stuff, trying to pull herself out from the depths of grief. I found that really fascinating, really interesting. Then she gets to their local historical society, and as a way to give her purpose again with low pressure, she volunteers herself there, and that was all very interesting. I'm interested in family history research myself, so I thought that was going to be really good, but instead of sort of focusing around a family, or at this part in the book wasn't focused around a certain family, she focused on fires that had been in the area and how the town has changed itself, which is not necessarily what I'm finding interesting. For me, it's more the family and the people. So it just kind of got to a point where the character that I was really enjoying, her sort of stalled a little bit, and the character that I wasn't enjoying still wasn't enjoyable, and I just went, no, this is not for me. But I feel like it could be a good book for someone else. A book that I did actually finish, it ended up being on audio, but I'll quickly talk about it now. I think I finished it first before I DNF'd all these books, but I forgot to talk about it until now. That is The Surgeon of Crowthorne by Simon Winchester. I ended up finishing it on audio. It was loaned to me by my uncle, and it was interesting but also very dry in certain points. So it was about the creation of the Oxford English Dictionary and a man that has severe mental health issues that ended up contributing a lot to the dictionary from his residence as an asylum patient. When we were actually following the mental health patient, William Chester Minor, I found that really interesting when they used him as the narrative to creating the Oxford Dictionary and how he helped and what sort of led to his mental health struggles and his treatments and things like that and how he lived. I found that really fascinating. At the beginning though, they kind of focused a little bit on previous dictionaries and how this particular dictionary was started, and although that was kind of interesting, I feel like it was also done in, from my perspective, in a slightly sort of dry way, so I did actually need to listen to this one on audio to get through it. I'm glad I read it, but it wasn't as interesting as some non-fictions can be. The second book that I managed to finish is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. This was a surprise to me that I actually ended up picking up and reading it. I've seen it all over social media. I'm in the book sphere, of course I've seen it, but I was a bit like, not really gripping me. I kind of know where the romance goes because, you know, everyone kind of does. It's sort of spoiled by what trope it is. But it wasn't until I went to dinner with my sister-in-law, she asked me whether I'd read it. She'd also read Iron Flame at that point, and that kind of just sort of pushed me over the edge that I was like, okay, I'll give this a read. This is really fun. I feel like it's a lot like Divergent, the YA one that I read when I was a teenager. The way that sort of, like, they're definitely different. The plot and everything is not the same, but being in a ruthless group of people that you have to choose a certain faction to go into, or quadrant, I think is what they call them in this universe, but you have to decide a different path, and she's picked the ruthless one, which is what Triss does, going with Dauntless, and then there's the love interest, which seems really harsh on the outside, but he's actually good and sweet and everything once they get to know them. So for me, I feel these kinds of books, like I haven't read Sarah J Maas or anything really like that, Holly Black, and I think they're not YA ones, but I feel like this is my generation who grew up reading like Twilight, Divergent, The Hunger Games, and now this is adulted up a bit. The romance in it was really good. It is definitely an adult romance. I had a really good time. I really enjoyed this. It was a little bit hard to begin with at the start. I feel like for me, I've been reading a lot of epic fantasies, and I felt like Rebecca Yarros could have added a bit more world building, and I kind of get also that it doesn't, I think it's supposed to be more accessible. Like, it's not supposed to be epic fantasy that you have to have, like, not that you have to, like, there's no have-to-have-tos, there's no gatekeepers or anything like that. But sometimes we do see that epic fantasy is harder for just the average reader to just jump into because they're not as used to the writing style, they're not as used to the heavy world building. And so for me, going from something where I just finished up with A Song of Ice and Fire and jumping into this, it was a little bit jarring. And I feel like this had the potential to be my favourite book of the year, or one of my favourites, if it was a bit thicker on the world building. A lot of the time, I didn't feel like we were in a Dragon Rider college, and that I kind of felt was a little bit disappointing for me as a reader, because I feel like Violet joined the Riders Quadrant to prove to people that she could do it, that she could be tough and that she could be a warrior. But for me, I feel like, wouldn't you join because you want to ride dragons? Otherwise, wouldn't you just go into foot soldiers? And that's what I found a little bit sort of interesting for me, knowing that it was going to be a Dragon Rider book, but how little the beginning of the book actually focused on dragons, and how little Violet's motivations were because of the dragons. So that was a little bit difficult. I also found with a lot of her friends in her wing, or her section, I kind of get a bit confused about how that all works. I didn't get a sense of who each of the characters were. Like, I sort of knew their names, but I didn't feel like I had as much depth. I couldn't picture them as much, and not just like in appearance, because I think she gave a lot of appearances for them, but I just didn't feel like I knew them enough as people all the time to really differentiate and be like, oh yes, that's person and that's one. They were kind of just like faceless people that were floating around as names, but I didn't get a lot of their personalities as I would have liked to get. I liked this, but there were parts of it where I felt like, am I going to finish this? Do I care? I read it very slowly until the romance kicked off, and then I was like, I want to find out what happens with these people. So I'm pretty much reading it for the romance, not the fantasy stuff, but I do like that it's in a fantasy backdrop because that's what I prefer. And then the last one that I want to talk about really briefly is unfortunately a DNF, and that is Throne of Jade, book 2 in the Temeraire series, Naomi Novik. I read the first one years and years ago, and I've been holding on to reading the next books in the series, wanting to continue it, and unfortunately it's going to be a DNF of this one and a DNF of the series. I really didn't get very far into it, and I feel like it's just too slow of a pace of a book for me wanting to enjoy reading and to really be enjoying what I'm reading. It just doesn't feel worth it for me to continue one of these books. I remember the moment when I decided to DNF this, and it's when it took a whole paragraph for a character to say something when it should have taken a sentence or a few words, and I just went, no, I can't. Life is too short. I still want to read other things that Naomi Novik does, especially Spinning Silver and what's the other one? Uprooted. I want to do them, but I just think, unfortunately, the Temeraire series is not going to be for me. And it could be a really good series. A lot of people love it, so give it a go if you're still interested. Sadly, I also had the third one. I got the second and the third at the op shop, and I'm going to unhaul the entire series now, including the first one. I don't feel a strong enough pull to keep the first one without reading the rest of the series. It does make me sad, but again, life is too short, and it's just not for me, unfortunately. Thank you guys so much for watching this video and for hanging out with me again. I should edit this down to a much quicker video than what it has been to be filming, and I will see you guys sometime soon in the next one. If you want to keep up with me sort of more regularly, go to my Instagram. I'll leave it linked down below. And thanks for watching again.
Bye! Hi everybody, this is a couple months later and I'm now here to film the second half of March and all of April. It has been a really interesting reading start to the year. I have really felt not motivated at all to read. I kind of went through a bit of a slumpy burnout phase this month, April, with reading and writing. Nothing was kind of really fun, so I just sunk into TV and I'm trying to think what else, but I think it was a lot of TV. Work also got pretty crazy for me as well. That took a lot of mental energy. I am really loving reading again though. I have slowly come back into a reading space and enjoying it, and I'm loving booktube right now. I haven't started writing yet, but anyways. So this is going to be very higgledy-piggledy because I have basically only finished one thing, which will technically two, but these next two volumes of the Sonic comics that Daniel and I are reading together. We did volume 5, Crisis City, and volume 6, The Last Minute. These ones were super fun. It's the story that's going on right now is still not resolved. It is about a Eggman, the evil dude, Dr. Robotnik. He has invented this virus that turns anything that touches it, but specifically human, people, sentient things, because these are animals, it turns the characters into robots, but like zombie robots. To me that was really interesting because I find medical related plot lines really interesting. Still not resolved yet. Oh my goodness. I finished this one this afternoon and it ended on a cliffhanger. So Daniel and I will be buying the next one and hopefully that kind of gets resolved. It's really interesting to be reading such a long-standing comic because I really have never read this kind of thing to know what it's like and how soon things clean up and tidy up and how long arcs are, and it's just a brand new experience for me, but I'm still really enjoying it. It's really good. And Daniel is also happy to report that for Daniel, he's always played the video games and watched the movies and the TV shows but never read the comics, and he's finding a lot of value in them because there's a lot of characters that were just not mentioned at all in any of those, only in the comics, and he's finding it really interesting to be reading something that's really familiar to him but also is like an extension of it, which is like the definition of why I love well, not the definition, but it's part of the reason why I love reading books and why movies are great, but it's also great to read the book version because it expands on them. Here's where the reading stuff gets a little bit complicated, and I'm going to try not to spend a lot of time talking about things. Reading has been a really strange experience for me lately. I think since becoming a mum, because less free time, things have kind of changed for me reading wise, where I will put down books but I don't quite feel like I'm ready to DNF them yet until I am actually ready to DNF them and I get that feeling.
Hey, Editing Joe here. I just wanted to add a bit more context and explanation to what I was saying because I don't really think I talk about it succinctly enough in that clip. For me, I've always DNF'd books, but I think I was a lot quicker at DNFing them, plus I also DNF'd less. So books that start out slow, pre-mum, because I had, I would say, more time definitely, but also a bit more mental capacity, it was easier to push through slower books or books that were less interesting because I had almost like unlimited time to do it. I had a lot more time to do it. Now I get kind of two different DNF feelings where one, I'm just going to totally DNF it, get rid of it, see you later. And another one is that I think there's something here, but it's just not the right time. And I'm not willing to waste reading time on something that's feeling boring right now, where I feel like there's a chance that if I pick it up later, it'll be better. So that's what's kind of changed for me now with reading. And this next book that I'm talking about, it's actually one that I think if I'd started it pre-baby, I would have potentially have read as far as I eventually got to in this wrap up and then DNF'd it completely. Instead of what I actually did this time after Miles is that I started it, put it down for like 6 months or a year. I think it's like a year. I put it down for ages because I was just not feeling it at the time, but I didn't know whether it was just what my life is like and maybe a bit of a break can help. And then I've picked it up again and discovered that no, actually it's not. it's not the book, or it's not me, or anyways, we're just not meant to be. So hopefully that adds a bit more explanation to how my reading has changed.
And that is The Priory of the Orange Tree. sadly, by Samantha Shannon. I think the difference is that Iron Flame isn't hard to read sentence structure wise. This I'm finding incredibly difficult to read and not really enjoyable. I'm just not connecting with Samantha Shannon as an author. I'm not connecting with her writing style, and that's a me thing. Great thing about books is that different people enjoy different things. They're so vast. What makes me sad is that I really wanted to like this book. I think the cover is stunning, the title's awesome, but the cover is so beautiful and I wanted to love this book, but then when I open it, it's so hard for me to read personally. I started this in August 2022, which Miles was a couple months old at that point. I picked it up and I actually was annotating it, so I got some flags, and I have a note in here that about when I put it down and the date. That's how I know. And I just said that I'm just not taking this in. I'm going to stop reading, and then I just must have gone on to other things and never picked it up. I felt like picking it up this month and I gave it a bit more of a shot. I think about another 30 pages, and I'm not connecting. It's not for me. The writing style I find incredibly difficult to get absorbed in, and I'm also the characters as well I'm not really connecting with. The main part that I've read has been following the Queen, Sabran. I just have no reason to like her as a person. So to give you a bit of a description of what this book is about, because for me, I've heard a lot about the Priory with the Orange Tree, but not actually what it was about. And there are lots of characters and lots of threads in this, but the main one that I want to talk about is that it's about this queendom. So there's this small island, there's a massive map where there's lots of different nations intertwining. And again, like, it's this massive fantasy book that I thought I really wanted to love. There's all these different nations, and there's also that there. And I mean, look at that. This pains me that I didn't enjoy it. Honestly, I've given it my best shot, but it is so big and it's just not for me. The main parts that I have read is about this tiny island here, Inns, and it is a queendom instead of a kingdom. So the monarch title is passed down from mother to daughter, which is so cool. And the reason they continue to get passed down is that their belief system is that this particular line of queens ensures that this big bad evil, the nameless one, doesn't come back. I think it's a dragon. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be a wyvern or worm, but with like a W in it. It's, of course it's got a W, a Y in it, like W-Y-R-M. Please put the text up myself. There's this big bad thing that they believe that to keep it from coming back, then this particular family has to sit on, or this particular line of women has to sit on the throne. I'm really sad that it's not for me, but it's not. A lot of people love this book. It got a lot of buzz a few years ago. I just look at this gorgeous cover and I just think, man, I want this on my shelf, and I want to say that I've read it and that I loved it, and I just didn't. It's kind of funny that I have kept it for now. I don't know when I bought it, but I stopped reading it in August 2022, and so now I've essentially only kept it for 2 years. Picked it up again and went, not for me. Thank you so much for watching my channel again. Sorry for this super long video. If you made it to the end, please comment some kind of flower emoji. If you don't know what else to comment, otherwise I would love other big comments of, or just, you know, tell me word thoughts of this video, but otherwise just comment a flower if you would like to, and don't forget to like this one and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more. Thank you guys so much for supporting me again and watching this video and hanging around, and I will talk to you in my next one. Bye!